Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to all of you who have already joined the webinar. Welcome to you from on behalf of Swift Kanban and Digite. We are happy to bring one of our monthly webinars to you again this month. And for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, a special welcome to you as well. Today's webinar is, the topic of the webinar is Fika Stories, how to get your Kanban initiative back on track. And without further ado, let me just get started with the agenda for the webinar. We'll go through some introductions and I'll introduce the main speaker to you today. After that, I'll just do a quick poll, 3 questions, just to get a quick idea of the audience today and your experience with Kanban, and that will hopefully help shape the content of the webinar today and the conversations in terms of the Q&A. And then, of course, I will pass on I will give you a quick introduction about Digite, those of you who may not have heard about us, and then quickly hand over the mic to today's main speaker, Christophe Achouiantz, and he'll be our main presenter today for the webinar. And at the end of it, we will do a Q&A session. So feel free to go ahead and ask any questions using the questions box that you will see on the right side of your GoToWebinar panel. And we are recording the webinar, so you should be able to get the recording once we finish with the webinar today. We'll follow it up with an email and send you the recording of the webinar as well. So you don't need to be taking any notes, etc. So before we go ahead, let me go ahead and ask you a couple of polls so that we can get some idea about your experience. And you should be seeing the poll right about now on your screens. So we just wanted to know what kind of experience your team or your organization has with Kanban, and if you could just give us a quick response to that, that'd be really great. And let me just give a couple of more seconds here to see all of your responses. All right, looks like most people have responded to the poll. Let me go ahead and close that, and let's see what the results look like. So you can see that quite a few of you, nearly half of you, have less than a year's experience with Kanban, about 25%, 1 to 3 years, and another 25% more than 3 years. Let me go ahead and take the next one. And just be patient with us for going through these questions. Again, that this helps to make sure that we can get a sense of what your overall experience with Kanban is. So secondly, and of course this refers to the topic from today's webinar, have you faced challenges with your Kanban implementation? Again, probably a more simplistic question, but still let's go ahead and get some responses on that. All right. Again, looks like many of you have answered it. Let me go ahead and close that and show you the results of that. So as you can see, clearly, most people going through any process improvement initiative will face some challenges, and sometimes you might be able to move forward to make progress beyond the challenges. Sometimes you might need help. And you see that about distribution of 30, 65, and 5%. Let me go ahead and present you the last question, and then we can get on with the actual webinar. And you can select multiple answers here. What benefits have you seen from using Kanban? And again, I'll give a couple of seconds here. All right, so let's go ahead and close the poll and let's show you the results. So Most of you have seen some benefits from Kanban already, even though many of you have less than 1 year's experience. You've seen already better visualization and better understanding of teamwork. That's clearly a big benefit of Kanban that most people see initially. Reducing cycle time and improved flow and throughput, and of course, improved process and collaboration. So thank you very much for responding to those poll results. Let's go on with the webinar itself, and let me bring my presentation back up here. All right, so with that, let me go ahead and introduce today's main speaker, Christophe Achouiantz. He's a lean agile coach and consultant. I'll quickly give you a longer introduction to him. My name is Mahesh Singh. I'm co-founder and responsible for marketing here at Digite, and I'm also a Kanban trainer and coach myself, and it's been my honor to be working with the Kanban community in general. Christophe, of course, has been working as a coach since 2007, and I met him at the Lean Kanban North America conference, I think in 2015, where he was, 2016 actually, where he was the Berkeley Award winner that year from Lean Kanban University. He's been working with a variety of organizations, helping them in their improvement journey. And of course, before that, he has a technical background. He's been a developer, project lead, product owner, and of course, been an entrepreneur as a startup founder. He's also the author of the Kanban Kickstart Field Guide, and he blogs at leanagileprojects.blogspot.com. And very interestingly, when I saw his some of his initial blog posts, I was curious about his background, and of course, like it says here, he's French, but works mainly out of Sweden, and of course, I'm sure he will introduce some aspects of that during his talk today. Quick word about Digite. We are a software company, product company that is headquartered out of the Bay Area in California, and we have offices in multiple locations around the world. We have been around for quite some time. We have multiple products that span Lean Kanban, Agile Application Lifecycle Management, Project Portfolio Management, and we have quite a number of users around the world in a variety of different corporations. And of course, so Kanban is our main Lean Kanban product, which we have built in close association with many of the Kanban community people, including David Anderson and a variety of other thought leaders that we worked with in these past 6-7 years. Just to give you a quick idea of Kanban, of course, a big part of our customers work with IT and software and DevOps type of applications, which is probably the most common application that most of you see here. We also have a fair amount of people using it for portfolio management capabilities, and we have some interesting capabilities and features in the portfolio management space. We've also worked with the Kanban community on enterprise services planning, and we have a lot of capabilities around demand shaping, risk management, and forecasting of your work based on the data that your team can show in terms of its performance. Besides that, of course, we have many people using it for non-IT purposes, people in marketing or HR, procurement, etc., a variety of functions. And of course, many of our users also use us for personal purposes, whether it is event planning or any personal work or family chores, etc. We also actually have a event planning, Thanksgiving party planning template that comes out of the box, so if any of you would like to take a look at it. We are quite well known for our analytics. We provide a very rich set of analytics, which compares quite favorably with the competition that's out there. And of course, just last slide here on just the kind of different customers that we have using our various products. So with that, let me go ahead and hand over the mic to Christophe. Christophe, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for doing this webinar with us. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter here so that you'll see that problem.
All right. Hi. Do you hear me, Mesh?
Yes, I do.
Oh, excellent. All right. Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Mahesh, for your introduction. And of course, thank you, Digite, for organizing this webinar. So today I'm going to speak about how to get your Kanban initiative back on track. As Mash already introduced me, I'm a French guy living in Sweden. Since 2009, I've been helping team and organization to adopt and experiment with Kanban. And on this journey, of course, I've seen many teams adopt Kanban, and some succeed and some fail. So today I would like to share some finding on what made some of these initiatives succeed better than others. So my goal here is to inspire you and perhaps give you some new or perhaps different way to look at Kanban than what you may have today. So for this presentation, and we've seen that in the poll you just did, I assume, of course, that you've been using Kanban for a while. You have a system in place, of perhaps several Kanban systems in place, and of course you certainly have had some success with it and perhaps some challenges when you would like to go further. I assume that you are a Kanban team member or a team lead or a flow manager, whatever you want to call that, or perhaps a manager of teams. And here I would like to make clear what I mean by this being on track and success here for Kanban initiatives. For me, success for a Kanban initiative, not so much that the team gets value from the Kanban system, because really most of the team, if not all of them, succeed with that, at least for a while. But for me, success is about making this Kanban system sticky and able to guide the team all the way towards high performance. And by sticky here, I mean that I want this Kanban system to be resilient, especially in the face of all this change we're seeing all the time, all this organization change that happen. We want the team to continue using Kanban through these challenges, through that. That's when it's sticky. And high performance for me is this ideal state where the team can deliver maximum business value with maximum efficiency while still having fun. So as a team lead, I want to take my team all the way to high performing and using Kanban to do that. That's what is success for me. So we'll see today that the Kanban system are actually quite resilient and sticky in themselves. It's built in this way. Kanban is very lightweight and it is the tendency to be rather sticky. But we often misinterpret them as fragile when you try to communicate with us. And we'll see what I mean with the Kanban system communicating with you. As it turned out, we'll see that it's when you think that your Kanban system is failing that Kanban is the most useful. You simply need to be able to be aware of it and listen to your system and do what needs to be done, of course, to get back. So we'll explore that, what I mean with all this stickiness and such. As I said, I'm French and living in Sweden. And starting to work there, it of course became very apparent that they were doing things differently in Sweden. And it is this one very visible aspect of Swedishness, if you will, that you will find in all and any organization, large or small, and it's the Fika. A Fika is basically a group or a team sitting together to have a moment to socialize, drinking coffee, usually. And it's probably twice per day, once in the morning, once during the afternoon. And this socialization is very it's all kind of topics related to what you did last weekend, news, sports, TV series, that kind of stuff. Very, very much non-work related. But once in a while, you can't help, but ventilate what's bothering you at work. And I work with many organizations, so actually I tend to Fika a lot, sitting with people, drinking coffee and discussing. And it turns out that there are a lot of very interesting stories that are shared during the Fika. Successes, failures, struggles, worries, etc. So being a Kanban coach, of course, people tend to share the Kanban story with me, asking about advices during the Fika. And thinking back about all this informal story I've been hearing that's been shared with me, I realized that everyone, and I mean everyone, has experienced some moment when Kanban stopped working. It just stopped to work. And what's interesting with these stories is that some of these teams quickly recover. Their Kanban stops, so to say, but just momentarily, and they quickly go back to some working Kanban, while others just don't. The Kanban system just crumbles and dies. And I thought that was really interesting there. What's behind that? There's a pattern at work here. There's at least something to learn. Especially interesting, of course, from those teams that recover. They recover perhaps even stronger from this Kanban heart attack. So what's this? What's behind it? So I started to look deeper, of course, into that, and this is what I've learned. Right after introducing Kanban, let's say you do that with a kickstart. As Maj said, I actually have been formalizing my way of starting Kanban teams with a Kanban kickstart. So it's basically a static method, system thinking approach to implementing Kanban static. So right after introducing Kanban, all teams increase their delivery capability. Basically, very quickly they get much better. And I call this phase the free ride. The free ride because even if, okay, the duration of this phase kind of varies greatly between teams, of course. But it's a free ride because everybody gets to experience it. And the reason for this improvement has to do with the team visually understanding its current situation. This is to say that the team members see who does what. And therefore they understand the team's current focus, which in turn makes them able to act in smart ways. And I think that this with focus and smartness is core to Kanban. The slogan for Kanban could be, makes you smarter somehow. So this smartness, so to say, it triggers improvement. And these improvements, especially early in this period, are usually rather straightforward and in retrospect rather obvious too. It's getting rid of double work. You see that two guys are doing the same thing, for instance. Helping each other to finish high priority work. Addressing plainly visible bottlenecks. For instance, the famous validation bottleneck, or testing bottlenecks. Improving work selection policy. Again, working what's most valuable, high priority. Limiting overburdening, etc., etc. So this works. This works for a while for everyone. Now, what's really interesting is what's happening right after this free ride period. Because after a while, and again, more or less long time, depending on your team, your context, etc., the teams always reach a point where the Kanban system has a heart attack. I would call that a heart attack. Because it seems to work, it seems to stop to work. And from that point, the team roughly follows three paths. There are some that manage to recover and continue the improvement journey. They're on the high-performing path. They just continue there. Some teams just get kind of stuck in the good enough path. They won't improve, but they won't quit. They just reach a state with, this is good enough for us. Why strive for more and better? Let's stay there. And of course, there have other teams that just simply stop using Kanban. So I think this point here is very interesting. It's very interesting because everything gets decided there. And that's coincided with this heart attack. So we need to get to closer look at this heart attack. And specifically, what did the team that managed to stay on the high performance path actually do? Again, all teams go through this, so it's important to handle this critical point the right way. All right. So what's this heart attack here? How do you know that you're having this heart attack? It's rather straightforward. It's a situation when you experience that your Kanban system doesn't work as it did before. You may start to realize that there is, for instance, too much on the board. The board is too heavy to handle too many things. It's cumbersome to update. The meetings, regardless of meetings, but they are too long. They're off topics. The board is not updated. The board doesn't reflect the current condition, for instance. You have work in progress limit, but no one is respecting them, and no one seems to care. Perhaps you start to skip some daily meetings because, the same as yesterday anyway, so why should we bother? You may have some definition of done on exit criteria in certain columns that you start to ignore, or all of these things at once. But basically, things worked before and they start to be neglected, so to say. And of course, when you see that, when you see this evidence of things are not working, based on that, you may easily come to the conclusion that, you know what, Kanban doesn't work. It just doesn't work, right? Or at least it doesn't work for us. It was a nice idea, but obviously, we cannot, it cannot cope with our context. Let's try, let's move on. Let's take the next method off the shelf. All right, so hold on. First, it's important to realize that what you're actually saying is this Kanban system, your Kanban system, doesn't work anymore. Doesn't mean that Kanban at large doesn't work here. Second, what is really happening is that your Kanban system is trying to communicate with you, get your attention. It's saying, look, I'm sorry, but you did not design me to do this. I'm not designed for this. I can't handle this situation. In other words, your Kanban system is telling you to pay attention and redesign it to be able to cope with your reality. And of course, if we do not act swiftly, you have some kind of limited time span here, the team will disconnect and your Kanban initiative will die for good. So there is some sort of misunderstanding at work, is some miscommunication. So this is what I found out, looking deeper into that. It's actually a mechanism at work here, and I call this mechanism the policy gap trap. It's a miscommunication that arises from a mismatch between the maturity of the team and the maturity of its Kanban system. So if you experience a Kanban heart attack, chances are that you have too big a gap between how you modeled the Kanban system and how you actually use it. So because your Kanban system governs how you work, this means that you have a mismatch between how you design work and workflow, through all these policies that you have, what you visualize, how to visualize, who does what, etc., meetings and such, and how you actually think about your work. You have too big of a gap, and that is a problem. You actually have two forms of this policy gap trap. You have what I call the policy depth trap and its reversed excess. For instance, if we look at the policy depth scenario, here you have a Kanban system that is kind of lagging behind. And it works like this, that you've been using your Kanban system for a while, and it has helped you to see and understand what to do and how. This information helped the whole team to reflect on what you should do and how, right? Because by seeing it in action, you actually try to understand, okay, I now get it. This is how we should work to be more efficient, to be more effective, to actually think for things to work. So in other words, using Kanban has helped your team mature, evolve the way you think about your work and how to manage it. The problem here is, of course, is that you have probably not reflected this new insight in your system of updating, adding, removing policies, right? So obviously, the more the time goes, the more you mature, and the more there's a gap between you and your Kanban system. Therefore, the Kanban system becomes more irrelevant every day until, of course, you just quit, you stop using it. There's another scenario which is perhaps less common, but I call it the policy access scenario, where you've started by engineering your Kanban system to fit your vision of what's a perfect way of working should look like. And as this vision is far removed from how the team is currently working, of course you end up with a large disconnect from the start here. Actually, usually you do that with the best of intentions. You want to create this healthy tension and force the team to rapidly evolve its way of working, to rapidly mature. For instance, you may set a workflow with different exit criteria, different definition of DOMs in the different columns that are way more advanced than what the team can manage right now. We'll have peer reviews, and we'll have automated validation, and we document everything as we go. It will be perfect. You may have set up some advanced class of service that no one really understands how that's supposed to work. May have too many work types because you thought too way far ahead that eventually it will help you shape your demand, for instance, but it just makes things very cumbersome right now. Or simply some work in progress policies that limits that no one really sees the need for it, and therefore are hard to follow. So you want to create a system that is too advanced for your team, and of course the system is not relevant for the team right now, therefore the team will of course disconnect and stop using it. So ideally, your Kanban system should be a true reflection of your team's current way of working. So succeeding with Kanban is to always have a balance between the policies you set and what the team actually does. As soon as you have a gap, you have a risk of people starting to disengage and abandoning the Kanban system. So this stickiness is about these two levels, the two maturity actually are aligned. Of course, this is very hard to do in real life. You will always have some gap. It's inevitable. And it's okay as long as it's rather small. As long as it's small, the team and the system manage that. I've also been tinkering with policies, creating more advanced policies and such. But if you do that, you need to only do that in a small scope, in small scale, perhaps a couple of policies at a time. And do that in a very controlled fashion to say that you as the leader know you're working on thin ice and need to pay extra attention that you will have a disconnect here. So you need to follow this policy closely. There is also an impact of this, so to say, mechanism, is that this policy depth or access will build up very quickly in new Kanban systems. When everything is more or less untested, it's just a draft really. Things, of course, you will build up this gap very quickly. It also will build up really quickly in I would say, what I call pre-cooked Kanban templates. Template that you borrow, reuse from different contexts. As soon as it's more complicated than doing done really, you try to reapply some thinking that is done somewhere else in another context, perhaps for other customers, for other stakeholders, for another team. If you borrow that and apply it, try to push it in your team, you know that it will not work, or at least you know that you will build very quickly a lot of policy excess or depth. So you need to be aware of that as a team lead. So what to do about that? Obviously, as a team lead or team member, you must be aware of that mechanism and be prepared to act when you see it in action. So you need to redesign your Kanban system, which means updating, adding, removing policies to reflect the team's current working, how you visualize work and workflow, what meetings you have and when, the agenda, who participate, etc. All this definition of them, that should really match how the team is currently doing things. So from my experience, I would say, and as a rule of thumb, you must be prepared to review and adjust your system policies at least once per week the first month. At least once per week the first month. And at least, I would say, once per month after that. Probably after 6 months, if you're in a very stable environment, you have a very stable system, you may need to update it less frequently. But again, even then, even in the very stable system, your team will still mature, will still find new ways to understand better how things should be, and we should be, of course, ready to do this kind of adjustment of the policy. Well, there is another way, of course, to look at the whole problem. It's not a problem at all, you know. When you spot such a Kanban heart attack, you should rejoice instead. In truly in fashion, this problem becomes a fantastic opportunity to improve your system. It tells you there is something to learn here, right? It also means that your team has matured while using Kanban. So the team knows better than at the start. So team members have gathered valuable input on their work and how they should manage it. So the next time this happens, you should not say, you know, Kanban doesn't work. You should instead say, wow, team, rejoice. Look at how far we've come together. We understand much better what work is for us and how we need to handle it. Let's adapt our policy or Kanban to actually match this new understanding. So that's actually very good news if you end up in this kind of situation. You're actually making progress. You're on the way to high performing, right? You're getting there. That's the only way to get there is actually to stumble on this problem. So I would say this very thing illustrate well an important point on the nature of Kanban, because developing Kanban system is like developing a product. You have the least or the poorest information at the start. So when designing your system, you know that it will be an imperfect system. It is really just a draft, especially the very first draft of your system. Because of course the context you're in, you know, the customer, the team members, your way of working, your process, how you interact with the stakeholder, etc. All of these things are probably still very fussy for your team. So even if you've been using a static method to start your Kanban system, you know, like the Kanban Kickstart, you know that the result of it, even though you've probably done the best upfront analysis that you can do, but the result is still an hypothesis at best. So of course you are agile practitioners, so you know that you will need feedback loops to improve your system. And in product development, you need, of course, direct feedback from your customers and your users. In a Kanban system, you get feedback directly from the system itself by this, you know, heart attack. And they make it very clear. That makes very clear that new information is available. That you need to redesign the system. The product, you know, the system needs to be updated to be viable, so to say. So actually, and allow me here to continue this train of thought, but perhaps a little bit off topic here, but it means that in the context of knowledge work, Kanban systems are living things. They evolve and adapt. They are very dynamic. What I mean here is that all the Kanban system policies are open for feedback and, of course, must be adapted on the journey to high performance. And that is very, of course, very different from other frameworks that are more prescriptive, like, let's say, Scrum. So as we've seen, Kanban is plastic, it's elastic, and it's dynamic. So your Kanban system will evolve and will become, of course, fitter and fitter to your context and challenges the more you use it. So I would say that eventually it will evolve into something far more sophisticated than what, say, Scrum can ever allow. Meaning that will allow you, of course, to go much further on the high-performing path. And all this, of course, because you know and you see that your Kanban is having a heart attack, stop to work once in a while. That's how this works. So that takes it back to the question here. So how do you sustainably stay in a high-performing path? As we all know, the universe is built in such a way that sooner or later your Kanban system will degenerate into stickies on the wall and die. That's just the way things are. To stay in the high-performing path, you obviously need to actively do something. And what we've just seen now is this: you need to have this ability to spot this policy gap, this depth and excess in policy, and you need to have, of course, the capability to act on this. Especially because this will not occur, of course, only once, but it will occur several times on your way to high performance, right? That will happen a lot of time. But that alone, of course, this ability to make the system sticky will not be sufficient. So the thing is that this simple advice is adapt your policies continuously during the journey, though quite obvious, has some challenges, of course. And actually, this is perhaps where the real challenge starts, because you will, without a doubt, uncover some change that require involving the rest of the organization. You know, some policies need to change, some way of working needs to change, or even some mindset that need to change for you to succeed, you know, delivering great stuff. So your Kanban system near-death experiences may reveal that some basic conditions for flow and continuous improvement are not yet in place in your organization. So in other words, your Kanban system is kind of acting as a canary in the mine, you know, a bird in the mine. When it dies, it means that you've discovered a major systemic issue. It does not need to be that all the time, but some of the issues you will find you will be able to resolve within your team or within the team immediately around you. But some of them will, of course, be structural issue. So how will you handle that? One way to see it again is to celebrate, of course, with management that you discover such a golden improvement opportunity for the whole organization. Yeah, you know, that's great news again. Unfortunately, depending on the type of organization you are in, you may feel very skeptical to how management will actually react to your system, your Kanban system dying for the good cause. Total indifference, perhaps, even blame, why not? So that probably means that you have a lot of work in front of you to make a change for you to succeed. To continue on your high-performing path, you need to solve all the things somewhere else. But here there's one bright spot, though, because you've used Kanban, so you should have facts, you should have data that shows how the current condition, how this system thing in the way is impacting your delivery. So it's not a hunch, it's not a feeling. It can go to management, show some hard numbers. This is how it's impacting us. So this information should make it easier for you to tell this change. So here we go into something else. So we go into more like mixing Kanban and lean change management. It's not the topic of this webinar, but there's absolutely much more to look into that. But anyway, that highlights the importance of the context of your Kanban initiative. For you to succeed, you should be in the right context. So actually, this is so important that almost regardless of your skill as a team leader, or flow manager, whatever you call it, you may be in a success assured situation or a failure assured situation from the start, depending on the context you're in. So to finish on this webinar, I want to look into what prerequisites should be in place to guarantee such a success assured situation. Because once you know that, when you see this definition, of course, your role as a team lead should be as simple as putting this condition in place. And of course, I'm saying that with some big irony, because that may prove to be quite a challenge. And to show you that, I would like to share this picture. This picture was taken by Henrik Kniberg, another agile coach from Sweden. It was a gathering in London in 2013, I believe. And I really love this definition because it's really summarized the exact precondition you need to deliver great things. That is to say, to be high performing. And it goes like this. Great results happen when, 1, people know why they are doing their work. 2, organizations focus on outcomes and impact rather than features. 3, teams decide what to do next based on immediate and direct feedback from the use of their work. And 4, everyone cares. And of course, this makes a lot of sense, and they kind of support each other. You know, if you know why you're doing something, of course you care. If you see the impact of what you're doing, of course you care. If you get direct feedback from the use of your work, of course you care. And if you care, then you're more willing to work. You know, all these things actually are tied to each other in a very interesting way. And it makes a lot of sense because, of course, that is an excellent definition of agile. You know, this is agile in a nutshell. Now, of course, this sounds like, of course, it's self-explanatory, but the implication here for you is that if any of these statements is false for your team, then you will have a hard time to make the team succeed. That is to bring the team to high performing. So your job, of course, as a team lead, is to then change the team prerequisites to make this happen. That can be, again, a lot of work. That is one perspective, you could say, from a Kanban perspective here, is that this requires your Kanban teams to be customer-facing, to be in direct contact with customer. If you have a team which is down in the cellar, never meeting the customer, you will not succeed, so to say, you will not be high-performing. Your team need to be truly end-to-end, that is to say, you must encompass in the business idea and all the way to the impact is realized. If you don't have this end-to-end Kanban team for the whole flow, again, you will not be able to actually see the impact of your work in the same way. You will not be able to get direct feedback, and you probably will not care either. So that's a very basic components end-to-end teams. And also, you will need to have a strong service orientation. You know, Kanban is about improving services. You should think about what your team is doing in terms of service. You have customers, you're handling their requests. So to say, the team, your team must be built from the service perspective and not from a pure organizational perspective where you just have, you know, from the organization chart, I have these 10 guys. This is not an ideal Kanban team to, you know, succeed and be on a high-performing path. So another way to say it is that if your Kanban team only contains developers and testers, for instance, you will get stuck at delivering good enough results, not great results. To have great results, that would, of course, require the business and operations to be included in your Kanban team. All right, so what have we seen today? I would like to summarize it in this way. You know, a perfect system is not nearly as good as a sticker system. So as a team leader here, instead of providing the absolute best system, to manage this very specific service and this specific customer in this environment. Because instead of providing that, you should provide a sticky system that will follow the maturity of its team closely until it gets to be perfect. The system must grow with the team. If you have an idea, I know exactly how it should be like that to succeed here, it won't work because it will have too much of a policy gap. So a sticky system is important because it's a sticky system that will lead you all the way to high performing. We also look at what failing with Kanban means. And actually, failing is a very important feedback loop. And we've seen how this policy gap track mechanism work and how to handle it, basically by quickly adapting your team policies to better fit your team's new understanding of work, workflow, relation to others, all these things. Finally, but quickly, the prerequisites that you as a team you need to put in place to get your team all the way to high performing. Right, so that's it. That's what I was thinking to show you today. That's wrapping up. Thanks a lot for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed this seminar, and I hope that all you got some new insights on what Kanban is for you, what you need to do with Kanban to get your initiative back on track. And of course, I would like to have some feedback from you guys, so do not hesitate to contact me, or even for more information, you find me here on Twitter or Kanban me. So thanks again for joining, and thanks Mahesh and Digitech for organizing, giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely, Christophe. That was a fantastic webinar, and I think a great topic that I think would be relevant to almost 100% of the teams implementing not only Kanban, but I think any improvement initiative. I love the concept of the fact that you celebrate the discovery of weakness and failure, because that's really the way to understand where your challenges lie, and therefore what is it that you need to work on. I think most people would get dejected and blame the Kanban method itself instead of understanding that there is a problem in the organization or in the culture or in the process, and use this as a opportunity to fix those, and credit the Kanban system for visualizing and helping them identify the problems. So that's a fantastic message there. So I'd like to invite all the people on the webinar to ask any questions that you have of Christophe. Christophe, let me start with a question or two on my own, which is, so firstly, of course, you talked about the overall challenge of the policy gap. Do you see a pattern in terms of what type of policies show more of a problem than others? I know that in our interactions with our customers, policies can be defined around what are the workflow rules that people follow, and maybe over-engineer the workflow rules. Sometimes they have challenges in terms of the definition of work itself. What is the different types of work that they do, and in analyzing their work and the work items, they might again over-engineer and create too many different types of things that they are not able to then deal with on the Kanban board. Sometimes it is the definition of done. You make it very elaborate, and it becomes hard for the team to then to stick to that, because that's really not what they were doing. So do you see a pattern in terms of what are the type of policies where you have a greater risk of a trap happening more likely than others?
Yeah, exactly as you said. I think the first policies that tend to go away are this definition of done, or this exit criteria that you have on the board. Usually, as you said, the team tend to be rather ambitious with them. And here it's very important as a team lead and as facilitating this process, that actually every day, in front of the board, when someone is moving a ticket, a card to the next step, actually really be active and proactive and asking, okay, have you actually done these things? Have you actually done all this? You know, we have a very ambitious checklist here. We all these things. Oh, yeah, no, actually, in this context, it didn't work. Okay, why didn't it work? Well, because it's, you know, it's too complex. So, okay, how should it be? Why should we remove this thing? Or should we reformulate it so that it's working in your context? This is very important to, it's something that I don't see quite enough during the daily meetings, you know, to challenge this definition of done and to make sure they're adapted continuously all the time so that you don't get into these large gaps. So that's the first thing that goes out the window. The second thing would be probably the WIP limits. The WIP limits is something that, especially at the start, teams start, it's kind of counterintuitive, so it's easy that you don't follow them, and you start to ignore that. It's read all the time. The policies that are more visual tend to stick longer because they're in your face and you just, you know, cannot miss them.
Right, absolutely. The other question that I have is, do you see a situation where there is a conflict between policies that the team has defined versus policy that might be coming from a central group like a SEPG or a quality group in the organization? Many of our customers have, a central organization that is also defining a lot of the policies, and sometimes teams struggle to, even otherwise, even in a regular basis, they struggle to keep up with those policies. Do you see that kind of a conflict?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's you know, it's a syndrome. It's not invented here. I refer to that when you try to, you have pre-cooked solution, you try to apply them in your context without the understanding of why was that taken this way, what was the benefit of that. As soon as this information is not with you, just to say you have some kind of handover, you know, like in agile development, you have some handover, you're not, the thinking is not there, then of course you will struggle with these policies. And actually sometimes this is very interesting to see the gap between the policies coming from high above and actually the policy cooking, so to say, growing at the team level. And that's an excellent opportunity to actually, as a team, to take that and of course try to give that feedback. Here you have some very interesting feedback to give back to this central organ that is taking these policies. Again, the ambition is that the thinking probably here is that, you know, we want everyone to work in the same way. But I've been in situation where, for instance, working with SAP teams, you know, I'm saying, look, you need to follow this IT policies everyone is doing. And they were like, but you know, we're not IT. We finance guys. You know, this has nothing to do with us. You know, there's really a mismatch here of a big understanding, miscommunication mismatch here. So that's a problem.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the questions from the audience is that our problem, our difficulties breaking down the stories either before being pulled or stories being too large during the process. It causes bottlenecks to occur. So I think that's a policy where how do you size the work that is going to go on a Kanban board? Any ideas on how to?
Okay, so probably you would solve that by having some kind of a definition of ready, so to say. The stories or the tickets are ready for us to take in if they comply to this definition, and probably here, if you have an issue, it won't solve itself, so to say. You probably need to grow your Kanban, so to say, upstream. You probably need some other steps, you know, between the moment you receive these big blocks and the moment you actually take them and work with them. You probably need some extra step here to refine that, of course, to break them down in smaller chunks. So actually, the way to solve that using your Kanban is to extend your Kanban, to grow your Kanban upstream, to visualize that part, and again, discuss policies here. Who's doing that? When? And try, of course, at the start to be as close to the team as possible, follow the actual steps that the team is currently doing to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes sense to me. Hopefully, takes takes care of the question being asked. Hopefully, the person who asked the question is also clear about that. I mean, I think the whole issue of sizing and making sure that you are moving away from the sort of traditional estimation processes and more by just the evenness of work that is coming onto the Kanban board and measuring flow based on that is a big part of the way that teams implement Kanban. I think that is exactly what is needed. You want to make sure that you're putting in the steps that is needed to break down work into the appropriate chunks.
Sure.
Another question from the audience is how do you typically see policies being visualized, and do you see some best practices around that to make sure that people understand that that they're actually seeing a gap between what they're doing versus what the policy says?
Right.
Are there any tools for that?
Yes, so that's very important to visualize things that you see exist. If you don't see them, they're not there, and it's easy to forget them. So the way I do that is to always have on the side of the board. It could be, if you're using physical board, of course, that's directly on the side. If you're using a digital board, it would be the side of the big TV or the projector you're using to visualize your to show your board. It would be a list of policies. So you would have visual policy, for instance, what different colors mean. You could visualize by, a different post-it with different colors and writing on it what kind of type of work is that. And then you will have some definition per column, for instance. These are the checklists we have per column. These are the policies we have that are more general, for instance, when we meet and such. So, but it's very important that are, so to say, where you have your daily meeting. And as a Kanban leader, or what you call yourself, team lead, you actually should be easily to refer to that. If everyone is in the same room, of course, that's very easy. Just point at the picture, so to say. If it's not, if you're truly distributed, everyone should work digitally, then I find it a bit more difficult, because you probably need to have some other way to do that. Either that you take a picture of that, or you have some kind of a PowerPoint showing this, and you probably need to switch during your daily meeting from this PowerPoint with all these policies to your board. Some solution, of course, have some support for definition of done in each columns. But that's the thing. It should be visual. You should be able to point at it, to refer to it, as it does not exist, so to say.
Great. Another question that is there. You mentioned towards the end of the webinar, you mentioned that teams need to be customer facing. Now, and of course, they need to be sort of end to end. But very often it happens that there are teams that are more internal. They may be help desk teams, or they may be internal support teams, that kind of function. So I assume that when you meant the customer could be internal or external. It doesn't really matter as long as they are seeing their own customer.
Absolutely. Of course, each team must define this is our customers, and customer facing could be, of course, that it could be totally internal. For instance, if you're an API team that's working within IT departments, your customers are other teams. But it's important that you identify who's your customer, and you have a way to have a dialogue with them, to get feedback from them. So actually, the best would be, of course, again, just to go and speak with them and ask them, what do you think about the service we're providing to you? What can we improve to have this regular discussion, so to say, with the customer. So of course it can be internal customers.
Right. All right. Great. So I think we really have come to the top of the hour, or the bottom of the hour here, and out of time. There are a few other questions that came. Some of them were not exactly on the topic today. We will reach out to each of you and respond to the question that you asked. A couple of questions that I was not able to take up on the webinar today, but we will be in touch with you. And of course, as Christophe said, do you have any additional point to discuss, please feel free to reach out to him as well. So Christophe, with that, let's close the webinar. Thank you so much for working with us on this, and I think presenting a very interesting as well as very relevant topic to pretty much every single Kanban team out there as they start to begin their Kanban journey. How do they deal with the weaknesses or failures that they encounter on the way? And I think you've given a fantastic framework for them to deal with that.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, great pleasure. To the audience, thank you all for joining us today. Really wonderful to have you here. And we will be in touch with a follow-up email where we will share the recording of the webinar with you, as well as any questions that you have asked. We will respond to that. And we'll be back next month with the next webinar that we will publish. If you have any questions from Digitize of Kanban, just send us an email or send out a tweet to us. And if you have any requirements in terms of looking at a tool, we welcome you to take a look at Swift Kanban. With that, I'd like to close the webinar. Thanks again to everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.